housing associations, other providers will be absolutely vital for many, many years to come in delivering social and affordable homes. But it is right that we get councils back in the game and get building at scale.
The government's announcing how it's dividing up the money it's going to spend on new social homes. Sir Keir Starmer pledged to spend £39 billion. And today we find out that £10 billion of that will be spent in English regions outside of London, which should be enough to build 70,000 homes. Another £6 billion will be spent inside London. We can speak now to Labour's Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook. Good morning to you.
Morning, Calum.
How soon will these homes be available?
So each of the strategic partners that are being awarded funding under this initial wave of allocations, that includes councils, housing associations and other providers, will have a delivery schedule agreed with Homes England, but we will see homes built in this Parliament with this funding. It's part of this biggest investment in social and affordable housing in a generation that this government have brought forward, that 10-year, £39 billion social and affordable homes programme. I just convey to your listeners the size of that money. That is the biggest investment in recent memory. This is the first wave. It will get houses delivered and delivered quickly. One of the ways that Homes England scored bids was on who could bring delivery forward first. And we are seeing councils as part of those strategic partners, as I've said. We're also holding money back for future rounds, and we'll prioritise that funding for social, rent and council housing.
OK, so this initial £10 billion, as you're guessing at there, is a mix of housing types across England, which does appear to be in line with what Sir Keir Starmer's policy was. Andy Burnham had called for the entirety of this £39 billion to be spent purely on council houses. So why has the pledge been watered down?
Well, I don't think that's quite correct. He didn't say in previous interviews that everything should go on council housing.
He said at the launch of his campaign to be MP for Makerfield, he said the £39 billion fund, quote, should be dedicated to council homes. Let's not be coy anymore.
Yeah, and what we are doing through the programme is not only allocating some of that initial wave to councils, so we've got 3 councils that are in the strategic partners that are giving money, but holding more money back in the programme as a whole to ensure that we can prioritise council house building. The Prime Minister is absolutely right to put an emphasis on council housing. It's got a range of benefits, including democratic accountability, the ability to tailor provision much better to local need. And it's obviously also the case that we have never built enough social homes in this country since councils were in the driving force in the last century. So we do have to raise our ambition. The Prime Minister is absolutely right. We will get more council house building out of the programme as it's been revised under this Prime Minister. But we also need to see delivery, and housing associations will continue to play a key role in bringing forward new social and affordable homes.
But to be clear, the £39 billion is not going to be dedicated to council homes. Some of it will be spent in other ways, on other types of housing.
Yep, that's absolutely right.
Fine.
The whole £39 billion is not going to go to councils. I don't think councils, even by their own admission, would have the capacity to use all of that £39 billion. We've got to scale things up here. Just to put in context for your listeners, in 1953, councils built just under 200,000 homes. That absolutely fell off a cliff in the 1980s as a result of the right to buy. We were down to rates of house building by councils of around 1,000 in 2013. This government has delivered the highest rate of council house building since 1991-1992 last year. That's a base we can build on, but the Prime Minister's absolutely right in pushing us to go further. And as I say, through this allocation, through also the £16 billion we're holding back for the rest of the programme, we will see more money going to councils, and will allow them to step up and get back to those rates that we achieved before things fell off a cliff in the early 1980s.
So help us understand why that's a good thing, why council involvement in this is a good thing. So according to the Chartered Institute of Housing, 162 out of 317, so barely half of England's local authorities now own or build homes. So what is the advantage of getting an inexperienced council to build a house rather than a housing association or indeed another organisation with far more experience?
Well, as I said, I just want to make clear housing associations, other providers will be absolutely vital for many, many years to come in delivering social and affordable homes. But it is right that we get councils back in the game and get building at scale, because as I've said previously in response to one of your earlier questions, council housing has a range of benefits. democratically accountable, the ability for those local authorities to tailor provision to meet local need, that asset that they get to retain. And it's also the case, as I said, that the last time we built social housing on a scale that this country required, councils were the driving force. We've got to get them seriously back on the pitch. That's what the allocation of funding in this initial wave will do. But as I've said, importantly, we're holding back £16 billion of funding outside London that we'll prioritise for councils. And really importantly, you mentioned it at the top of the piece there, London is setting out at least £6 billion of allocations, and almost half of London's money is going to go to councils. And what we hope to see as we deepen devolution as the programme progresses is more council house building in those areas where mayors can set the strategic priority of development and have far greater control on how this money gets spent.
We'll come back to mayors in just a sec. Again, though, just on the advantages or indeed disadvantages of council homes, these are more expensive for the state, which has to inject more subsidy in order to keep rents low, where tenants pay around 50% of the local market rate. In contrast, when we refer to affordable homes, tenants pay up to 80% of the market rate. So council homes cost a lot more money. They are expected to be delivered by inexperienced councils. Why should the state pick up the cost here?
Well, look, some councils are very experienced and getting more experienced by the day in delivering. That's why 3 of the strategic partners that are going to get long-term funding through this initial wave are councils. So it's not the case that all councils are inexperienced. We've absolutely have to skill them up. We're putting in an extra £46 million to improve skills and capability in councils to get them back in the game. As I've laid out, I think, in quite some detail, the range of benefits that are provided.
What about the cost? Specifically on the cost. They are the most expensive option for the state.
They are expensive, and they're
the most expensive, yeah.
Yep, you're right, and they are subsidised to the extent that rents are lower than private market rates. But I think, look, investment in social and affordable housing, and in particular council housing, is one of the best value for money investments we can make in terms of reducing the costs on welfare, reducing the cost of temporary accommodation. The cost of temporary accommodation for local authorities across the country is eye-watering. We have got to turn things around. We have got to get councils back in the game. As I say, there will continue to be a role for housing associations and other providers. Okay. But we want to get back to what the Prime Minister has tasked us with doing, which is delivering the biggest council house building drive since that post-war boom ended in the early 1980s.
You mentioned mayors a moment ago, and the government is giving mayors more power, including the ability to overrule councils if they reject planning applications. So to broaden that out a little, Mr Pennycook, what does accountability look like if those mayors fail to deliver? How does this government hold mayors accountable?
Well, there is an accountability framework in place for mayors already through integrated settlements. The government's looking at whether that needs to change as we deepen devolution. But on the principle, we think it's absolutely right that mayors are given the tools they need to set the strategic direction of development in their areas and to deliver on it. We're rolling out, through the announcement we made over the weekend and the consultation that was launched yesterday, a range of further planning powers for mayors, the ability to call in strategic sites, make development orders, set community infrastructure levies that are enjoyed already by the Mayor of London. We think other mayors should have those powers. They go alongside the need now, through powers we introduced in the Planning and Infrastructure Act, to set a strategic spatial plan for each mayoral strategic authority. So we're giving the mayors the powers to drive development. Let's be clear, councils will continue to make the majority of planning decisions. We're talking about strategic applications. In London, the mayor gets about 200 or so applications put to him each year. He decides on a handful. So we're saying that those big strategic sites, which mayors may need to take a view on, they should have the powers to do so.
When he was the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham urged the government to pause or suspend the right to buy scheme. Our listeners will be familiar, I'm sure. It lets council tenants purchase their homes at a discount. Is the government going to suspend the right to buy?
Well, we're not looking at completely suspending the right to buy. We've always been very clear that there is a place for long-term tenants who've been in their house for many, many years.
So you're suspending it a little bit? I don't understand what that means.
If you'll just let me finish, I will happily explain. We're not suspending the right to buy completely. What we have done is make fundamental changes to the right to buy. We've reduced the very generous discounts introduced in 2012 under the coalition government. We're making, through our social housing bill, fundamental reforms. For example, banning the right to buy on new build social homes for 35 years. So we are reducing the amount of stock that is flowing out at the same time as we build new social and affordable homes, including council homes, to get to that net positive. You know, we're losing too much stock. And that is seen in some of those impacts that I've talked about. Higher rates of temporary accommodation is incredibly costly. And if I can, Calum, just return us to the reason we're doing this. I represent a constituency in South East London. My borough has nearly 29,000 people on its housing waiting list. I have people in my surgery week in, week out, absolutely distraught. Kids sitting on the end of beds doing their homework, children sleeping in living rooms. We've got to act here. We've got an acute and entrenched housing crisis. This money that we're allocating this morning, that first wave, £9.5 billion to councils and housing associations, will let us build 73,000 homes. There's more to come. We're turning things around and doing what we committed to in our manifesto, which is delivering the biggest increase in social and affordable housing in a generation.
OK, Matthew Pennycook, thanks very much for your time this morning.